Hello everyone. I think it's no secret that in some countries, cars drive on the right side of the road, while in others, they drive on the left. That's why there are both right-hand drive and left-hand drive cars. But why is the world divided? Couldn't one option have been chosen and made the global standard? We'll try to find the answers to all these questions and more today. Get comfortable, we're getting started. It all started much earlier than you might imagine. Back when the roads were filled not with cars, but with knights on horseback, clattering in their armor. Back then, as now, most people were right-handed. Consequently, swords weren't held in their right hands. Times were harsh, and many matters were resolved practically without discussion. By driving on the left side of the road, the sword-wielding right hand was closer to oncoming riders, making it easier to defend or strike. This tradition, descended from the knights, was so strong that in 1300, Pope Boniface VIII ordered all pilgrims to keep to the left side of the road. But alongside the church and the knights, there was a working class, whose people also had their own concerns and worries. For example, transporting various goods from point A to point B. The goods were transported on carts pulled by poor horses, who clearly weren't entirely happy with the whole thing. The driver would periodically have to urge the poor animal on with a whip. And, as I mentioned earlier, most people were right-handed, so their whip ended up in their right hand. The driver intuitively began to shift to the left side of the cart. This positioned the hand holding the whip parallel to the horse. When two such carts met on the road, it was easier to pass each other if both kept to the right, since with the driver sitting on the left, it was easier to get a sense of the dimensions of their respective carriages. All this led to an unspoken rule that had emerged by the end of the 15th century. Those belonging to the elite drove on the left side of the road, while the working class rode on the right. Essentially, both left-hand and right-hand traffic existed at the same time, and they coexisted perfectly well. But what happened when a knight rode on horseback on one side and a cart with cargo on the other? The solution was simple. Social status was incredibly important in those days, and a knight, as a representative of the elite and power, always had an advantage. So in such a situation, the coachman, hoping to still have his head on his shoulders, would immediately pull over to the side of the road. It didn't matter which side of the road as long as it was quick. But in 1789, the French Revolution began. And it was this event that contributed to the division of the world into countries that drive on the left and right. Before the revolution, the elite, as we already know, had long-standing tradition of standing on the left and the common people on the right, briefly describing the French Revolution of 1789. It was a struggle between the bourgeoisie and the people against the king, the church, and the aristocracy. Before the revolution, France was divided into three estates. The first two were the clergy and the nobility, the elite, who made up only 2 to 3% of the population, and the third estate, the people and the bourgeoisie, made up the remaining 97 to 98%. When the revolution began, a vast mass of the people took control of the cities. The streets, especially in Paris, were dominated by armed or simply aggressive representatives of the common people, so to speak. For an aristocrat, demonstrating their status, for example, driving arrogantly on the left side of the road, became tantamount to signing a death warrant. To save their lives, they had to become invisible. Driving to the right was the easiest way to blend into the flow of traffic and avoid the attention of revolutionary patrols or crowds. Thus, changing lanes wasn't just a whim, but a literal reflection of the fact that power had shifted to the majority, and traditional privileges had become dangerous markers. After the end of the French Revolution, driving on the right side of the road was officially enshrined in France. The young General Napoleon Bonaparte, beginning his conquests, also applied this rule to his army. This was done for two reasons. First, it was a symbol of revolution and equality, a reminder that the time of the aristocratic elite was a thing of the past. Second, driving to the right offered a chance of surprise in battle, as most soldiers in the territories he intended to conquer were accustomed to attacks from the right. It was thanks to Napoleon's military campaigns that all countries conquered or under strong French influence permanently adopted right-hand traffic, while those Napoleon failed to subjugate retained the old tradition of keeping to the left. These were primarily Great Britain, as well as its staunch ally Portugal. I can sense the question hanging in the air: why does Russia, which defeated Napoleon, drive on the right? And what about America, which became independent long before his wars and also drives on the right? The fact is that right-hand traffic, as I've already said, was simply much more convenient for organizing traffic flow. In Russia, right-hand traffic was enshrined in 1752 by Empress Elizabeth Petrovna out of a domestic need to streamline the movement of sleighs and carts. It was pure logistics. In America, the reasons were the same, while in Russia, hatred of all things British only added fuel to the fire. In those years, British laws severely restricted trade and stifled American industry. Americans themselves were treated as second-class citizens. In such a situation, the American desire to reject everything British as much as possible was entirely logical. But the final chord in favor of right-hand driving in America, and indeed in much of the world, was struck by just one man. It was Uncle Henry Ford. Imagine, it was the early 20th century. Chaos reigned, and many countries were still unsure which side of the road to drive on. And then American industry entered the picture. In 1908, Ford released its legendary Model T, the first truly mass-produced automobile, intended to be affordable for every family. Henry Ford made a pragmatic decision that sealed the fate of the roads. He installed the steering wheel on the left. Why on the left? It's the most convenient position for driving on the right side of the road. Drivers have a better view of oncoming traffic and can safely overtake. Millions of these affordable cars flooded America and the world. Countries that already drove on the right, like Russia, France, and the United States, now had the perfect car. And for everyone else, a dilemma arose: either switch to right-hand traffic or buy more expensive right-hand drive cars. This is how we arrived at the final division. The right-hand side became the choice of the majority, imposed by Napoleon's policies, the convenience of freight transportation in America and Russia, and, most importantly, the industrial standards of Uncle Henry Ford and his Model T. Britain remained a supporter of left-hand traffic, having withstood Napoleon's onslaught and preserved ancient aristocratic traditions for the sake of practicality, as well as imposing its position on all its numerous colonies. That's why today Australia, India, South Africa, Japan, and many other countries drive on the left. They adopted this standard not from knights, but from the British Empire. So, the world was not divided by chance. The choice was made, and changing it now will cost $1 trillion. And that's all for today. Thank you for watching to the end. I hope you found this interesting. Share your thoughts in the comments, like, subscribe to the channel, and have a great time everyone. Until next time.